Let's see where we stand in terms of various mobile devices. We've already seen something similar to the pie chart on the left for mobile phones. This one happens to be for the fourth quarter of 2016, and here Apple did a little better than in 2016 as a whole. The next pie chart shows market share of operating systems in tablets. Android dominates this also, but Apple has about 25% of the market, and Windows is a major force also, with almost 15% of the market. The last pie chart shows operating systems for smartwatches. Apple leads this, while Tizen and Android both have about 20%. Note that Tizen is Samsung's smartwatch OS. Android Wear is still playing catch-up in this market. These charts show how much market share the different operating systems have for various mobile devices. But how many of these devices are actually sold? Here's a bar graph that shows approximately how many of each type of device was sold in 2016. I've added desktops and laptops to complete the picture and give us some context. Note that the numbers here are rounded to the nearest 25 million, and even then you may find some discrepancies if you look up the data on your own, especially if you're looking for laptop and tablet data, because they're starting to overlap, as in Microsoft Surface Pro, and different data collection firms count them differently. But in general, this bar graph should give you a good representation of how many of the various devices are sold. In particular, you can see that smartphone sales dominate the computing industry. 1.5 billion smartphones were sold in 2016. Compare that to just 150 million laptops. And again, keep in mind that these are global data. This chart shows the progression of smartphone operating systems from 2009 to 2016. We saw the beginning and end of this in the form of pie charts, but this shows you just how fast the Android operating system was adopted. In 2009, it was under 5%, and in 2013, it was already close to 80%. This is an interesting chart for a couple of reasons. First, it shows how popular Symbian OS was in certain parts of the world even as late as 2012. Second, these data are from a site called StatCounter. StatCounter is a product that bloggers and businesses can use on their websites to see how much and what kind of web traffic they're getting. This can help them with business decisions like whether to target certain markets or optimize their website for certain types of traffic. The data that StatCounter gathers is about visitors to websites that use StatCounter. Since StatCounter is on 2.5 million websites worldwide, this is valuable information about the kinds of devices used to access websites. The data that we have looked at so far was for sales data. For example, how many of the smartphones in 2017 had Android OS or iOS on them? The data you see here are usage data. How many visitors to StatCounter websites are using devices with Android OS or iOS on them? To see this distinction more clearly, let's focus on the US. In March of 2017, 53% of new smartphones sold shipped with Android, and 45% shipped with iOS. However, among the people in the United States who visited StatCounter websites using smartphones in March of 2017, 54% of those smartphones had iOS running on them, and 45% had Android running on them. By the way, I said that StatCounter is on 2.5 million websites worldwide. That's a lot. But Do you know how many websites there are in the world? I'll give you some choices. 250 million, 500 million, which is half a billion, 1 billion, or 2 billion. I'll give you 5 seconds to think about it, starting now. Okay. As of 2016, it is estimated that there are about 1 billion websites on the web. This chart shows how ubiquitous smartphones have become. These data are also from StatCounter. In other words, they are usage data. They indicate that more and more people are using mobile phones and tablets to access websites. Android OS only works on phones and tablets, while Windows dominates the PC market. As we've seen, Windows also runs on tablets and phones, but it's much less prevalent on those devices. I must admit that this one surprised me a bit when I first saw it. I thought to myself, this many people cannot be surfing the web on a mobile phone. I may be wrong about that, but I still think it's true from the perspective of using the mobile phone's web browser. However, this data is not necessarily limited to web browsers. You're still accessing a website if you use a mobile application to access it. In that respect, it's not as surprising that Android devices would be used to access websites more than Windows devices would. This chart shows the number of mobile apps downloaded from mobile app stores, like the iOS App Store or Google Play. You can see that more and more apps are being downloaded, but you can also see that the number of free apps downloaded greatly outnumbers the number of paid apps downloaded. Not only that, but the disparity seems fairly consistent over the years. Nearly 95% of mobile applications downloaded through the app stores are free applications. Having said that, those 5% of paid mobile applications are making money for app stores and developers. What's interesting is that despite the fact that over twice as many applications were downloaded from Google Play, people actually spent twice as much money on applications downloaded from the iOS App Store. So fewer iOS apps are downloaded, but they still make more money. Finally, let's look at how many people use the latest version of iOS versus how many people use the latest version of Android. The difference is significant and indicates that it could be more challenging to develop for Android if your application relies on the latest technology. Almost 90% of all iOS users have the latest version of the operating system, but less than 25% of Android users have the latest version of Android. The main reason for this is that it is the smartphone manufacturers like Samsung, LG, and Sony that are responsible for pushing out new versions of the Android operating system to users. Google is definitely concerned about this problem, and they should be. It's not just because app developers will want to use the latest operating system features, but perhaps more importantly, OS updates fix software bugs, including security vulnerabilities. If you don't have the latest version of the operating system, you're more vulnerable to attacks. And with the rise of mobile devices, attacks on mobile devices are becoming more and more common. Okay, let's revisit the quiz questions you were asked at the beginning of this presentation. What operating system dominated the smartphone market in 2009, 2 years after the iPhone came out? The answer is that Symbian OS, the operating system on Nokia phones and some others, dominated the smartphone market. but it wasn't long after this that Android phones took over. Next question. How many smartphone operating systems today have over 1% of the market? The answer is just 2, Android and iOS. And that doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon. The next question. What's the ratio of smartphones sold to laptops? The answer is 10 to 1. There were about 150 million laptops sold worldwide in 2016, but there were 1.5 billion smartphones sold, 10 times as many. Next question. Who makes more money on apps? Apple developers or Google developers? The answer is that Apple developers as a whole make about twice as much money on apps as Google developers, even though over twice as many apps are downloaded from the Google Play Store. Finally, how many Android users have the latest version of the operating system? The answer is a mere 25%, because smartphone manufacturers, and not Google, are responsible for sending updates to their customers. And that's it for this very brief history of mobile platforms. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video.